So this is Brian. I'm going to give another update today on my aquaponics various projects as well as some other backyard gardening works in progress. So there you can see the fish in the indoor aquaponics system having out some food. I feed them a fair amount. That's I don't know, they consume that in about 5 minutes, I guess, which is pretty much the rule of thumb. And I do that twice a day. You could certainly get away with less if you were just keeping these fish as pets, but in an aquaponics system, the more food that they eat and thus the more ammonia they produce, the more nitrogen you ultimately get to grow your plants with. So I've continued to use the the indoor garden, mostly for plant starts for outdoors, but also continuing some herbs in here, as well as strawberries. So I ordered some bare root, ever-bearing strawberries online, and they seem to have greened up really nicely, with the exception of this one which has kind of a gimp leaf there. I don't know if he's gonna, what his deal is, but anyway, they look okay so far. I've had mixed results with strawberries in here before, using just the ones that you buy at Lowe's. So far these guys look healthier than those have been, but we'll see. They tend to get brown leaves after a while every time I plant them in here, so we'll just see. In the back there I have some basil starting. Basil's been a successful grower, and it finally just got too big for the area, so I took it out and planted some more. And then there's my old parsley plant still leafing out. In the back there I've got some herbs starting in pots, kind of puny little starts. I'm not sure if I should have fertilized more. It is potting soil, but anyway, the idea there is to let them get to a sort of established size and then plant them outside as part of a sort of decorative / edible garden for my front patio area. And then over here on this right side I've got my various vegetable starts. So I've got some peppers and then various tomatoes, cherry and some heirloom. So anyway, I've already planted a bunch of tomatoes outside. Some have made it, some haven't, but I've just continued growing them in here and then transplanting them when they get to a decent size. So speaking of which, let's go outside. So here in Texas we had a nasty drought last summer, and our lakes are still quite low, but we've gotten a ton of rain this year, and so that's been really wonderful. I haven't had to water anything all winter, and we've also had a mild winter, so that's allowed me to get started on some stuff a little earlier than maybe I normally would be able to. So we'll start over here in this corner. I've got some buckets with the bottoms cut off, buried, and the idea here is to just kind of keep these plants contained. This side of the yard tends to be wetter than the rest, so because my neighbor waters a lot, and so I'm hoping to take advantage of some of that moisture that runs into my yard. Anyway, I don't have any sprinklers hooked up out here. My hope is that I'll get enough from his watering. So I've got some spearmint, some peppermint. The spearmint I started from seed indoors in the aquaponics and then transplanted. The peppermint I bought already as a seedling. Nothing's planted here yet, and then here I've got a couple more of those bare root strawberries. And then in here I'm hoping to get some onions and chives going. Some very small little seedlings so far, but we'll see. Once they get established, I'm hoping to have a good supply. But anyway, we'll see how that goes, especially with me not watering it. Here's my persimmon. So last year I made the mistake of fertilizing the persimmon, which was a bad idea. And they do say it's generally not a good idea because fertilizing a persimmon tends to make it grow really fast in wood shoots. But ultimately you want it to kind of grow steadily in all areas rather than putting a ton of energy into new growth. So as you can see right here, I've got this new branch that came in last year with the fertilizer, and it's actually a broader piece of wood here than it is on the supporting older piece. And so that's just kind of it just looks bad, and it may make it kind of top heavy. So anyway, that was a mistake. If I ever have the opportunity to plant one again, I won't fertilize it. And then also I didn't really prune it very well last year, so I ended up having like 2 really tall trunks, and I pruned one of those off in the fall because I didn't want 2 trunks. So anyway, it looks kind of ugly, but it's coming in nicely. Got a lot of leafy growth. Here's my live oak, which was planted by the builder. It's a pretty ugly live oak. I pruned it a bunch last fall, and it looks better now, but anyway, seems to be healthy. Good, lots of new growth, leaves coming in. Here's the grape. I'm trying the Niffin pruning method, which basically means you got 4 lateral vines coming off the trunk, and you basically have 4 old ones that you grow fruit off of, and then in the growing year you pick 4 more to replace those next year. So I don't have a lot of, some of the selection I have is kind of unideal. So I've got this guy, which is what I've picked to be the next top right branch. This one's going to be the next top left, bottom left down here, and then bottom right. So anyway, but it's looking great. A lot of good growth coming out. So maybe we'll get some grapes this year. Alright, moving on to the berries. These guys have always looked a little sketchy, and they're still looking that way. This is the dewberry plant. Got a little flower there, which is nice. But in general, it's kind of scrappy looking, so I don't know how this guy's going to do, but we'll give it time. Similar to grapes, you sort of pick last year's new growth as this year's fruiting growth, and then you pick this year's new growth to save for next year to fruit. And so we've got these new little starts here, which should be next year's fruit growth, and then these guys should get cut off at the end of this year, hopefully after fruiting some. And here's the blackberry. Now this is a more bush habit, or has more of a bush growing habit, as you can see. But again, we'll see. I don't know what to expect. These guys haven't exactly been vigorous growers, but we'll see. The peach tree has kind of been moving slowly this season. I don't know if that's normal, but we do have some buds coming in, or some flowers. And so hopefully this guy will produce some more peaches this year. We had 1 last year. We're hoping for more than 1 this year. But anyway, pretty soon it'll be time for me to prune this a bit, and then spray it with some copper spray to prevent fungus and various diseases. And then down here I've got some chives and some garlic chive, and hopefully more coming in. Here's some more regular chives over there, and I think that's a garlic chive. But anyway, I like having chives available, and also they supposedly repel bugs, especially ants, which were a problem last year. But I have a feeling I'm still going to need to use a physical barrier on the trunk like I did last year to prevent the ants from going up and harvesting off of the aphids. Alright, over here I've planted some asparagus in these little trenches. I just did this last week, so I don't see any sprouts yet, but hopefully these guys will come in soon. I did wait a little bit longer than they say you're supposed to before putting the root whatever into the ground, and anyway, hopefully they're not dead. We'll see. Right here we have Brussels sprouts, which I planted like back in October, November. And they're just now kind of looking good, but I'm afraid that because it's warming up that they're never going to produce any good tasting Brussels sprouts. So I may end up just pulling him out, but he's not hurting anything, so I'm just going to let him go as far as he goes over there. At the very least I'll have more leafy growth to put in my compost bin. Here's a couple heirloom tomatoes that I transplanted from inside. Right here I've got some carrots. Carrots starting, just a couple. Didn't have a very good germination rate out of them, so I planted some more. Hopefully those will come in soon. And now to the outdoor aquaponics system, which I've introduced in another video. I've made a few tweaks since then, and I've planted some things. So early on I didn't have very many fish, so I just kind of threw some seeds in here to start experimenting with how well it works to start things from seed inside this grow medium. These are all some mustard greens. They obviously don't look very healthy, probably because of lack of nitrogen or possibly iron. But that doesn't really bother me. I'm really just growing these as an experiment. And they seem to have gotten pretty well started in here. A couple more strawberries, bare root strawberries. This is another mustard green. This guy had started inside, so he was pretty healthy to begin with. And he's, based on the way he's growing, I would say he's probably bolting, but again, that's fine. I'm just going to let him grow as much as he wants to, and then I'll put him in the compost bin. This is some baby spinach that's been growing really slowly. And this is a little pepper plant I transplanted from indoors. Another Brussels sprout that I transplanted from the garden. He wasn't looking too good in the garden. He's actually grown quite a bit bigger in here, but we'll see. And then another tomato plant, and he's actually looking pretty decent, although he hasn't grown very vigorously. And the reason for that is probably the lack of nitrogen, which I have begun to rectify. So I've bought some more fish. I had one really unsuccessful trip to PetSmart. I buy the feeder fish because they're cheap, and I should have known before I bought them not to buy them, because there were a lot of listless and some dead fish in the tank at PetSmart. But I bought them anyway and came home, and almost all of them died in a matter of days. But I went back and bought some more, and so now I've got about 20-25 fish in here, some big, some small, and they seem to be really enjoying the tank. Seem to be right at home, swimming around happily, and they eat really vigorously too. They got a good appetite. So I haven't done a nitrogen test just yet since adding the new fish, but I will soon to see if they're starting to bring that level up. And I bought this nifty little auto feeder deal, and it's obviously meant for indoor tanks, so we'll see how long it lasts out here in the elements. I mean, it is protected or sheltered by that door, but anyway, it's a lot of plastic and stuff, so who knows how long it'll last in the heat and everything. But it works really well. Basically, you fill this little hopper with food, and then it's got a wide variety of feeding times and feeding sizes that you can choose. So basically this hopper rotates, dumps it into a little hole down here, which has a little nifty little plastic door on it that basically opens up at the end of the rotation, dumps the food in, and you can tell it to rotate once or rotate up to like 8 times in a single feeding, and then you can schedule up to 4 feedings throughout the day. So you can really have this thing dump a lot of food in your tank, even though it's a pretty small little thing. It's also got a neat little feature that lets you hook up an air hose. Let's see if you can see that, which basically just pumps air into the bottom of the food area, which is supposed to keep it drier and from clogging up, which is good for out here in the elements where we have rainy and humid days. I've already had it out here in a really heavy rainstorm, and it survived fine, still works. So I'm hopeful that it'll last a while. And then finally, one more update here. I created this little deal, which is just a bucket with a drain in it, which is hooked up to a hose, which comes underneath here and is hooked up to my drip irrigation system, which goes into my garden. And so the idea with that is I'll just drain some water off the aquaponics system, hopefully nitrogen-rich water into that, and that'll be kind of a way of fertilizing and watering my vegetable garden at the same time, using some good water from this tank. So anyway, I haven't needed to water much yet, but it does have enough pressure to actually ooze out of those drip lines, so it seems to be working pretty well. My hinge here, I need to reinforce this right here. The screws in this cheap fence wood don't really grip very well, so they're pulling through. But anyway, a few little tweaks, but that's basically the update. Once again, I've shown this before, but this is my refill tank. It's empty right now because we've had so much rain I don't need to fill it, but I'll fill that with tap water, let it sit for a few days for the chlorine to evaporate out, and then I'll just turn that on and it'll fill into the aquaponics system. And one more thing, so last year, because of the drought, I lost a ton of grass and had a really big dead area back out here, and so this is my attempt to rectify that. I bought some habit turf. It's a mix of blue grama grass, curly mesquite, and buffalo grass that the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center sells. And it's like $20 for a pound, which is more than enough to seed a small half yard like I'm doing right here. And basically I just tilled it up a bit. I didn't quite go as deep as they recommend, but I tilled it to about 3 or 4 inches. And then I sprinkled some compost over it. Not a lot, but whatever I had, and then spread all that grass over into it. So hopefully that'll start sprouting, and we'll have some native grasses started with a good foothold here in the middle. And then my hope is just that the native grasses will sort of survive the summer and grow or spread slowly, and then the Bermuda grass will continue to be healthy in the areas where I water, like around the trees. And so hopefully we'll have a mixture of the two, and the Bermuda won't invade the native grasses too much, since I won't be watering here in the summer. The Bermuda grass should die back when it's not getting water. Anyway, we'll see. It's an experiment. It was $20. If it doesn't work, I have a dead area in my yard, which I already did. So anyway, that's the update.